Hi, I'm Dallin Wall, the Herb Master. We're excited to announce this new book, the Herb Master's Guidebook. It's the synthesis of principles that I've learned and taught over more than 25 years of working with individuals, giving keynote speeches around the country, working with individuals in nutritional consultations, and working with herbs personally with my own family. I'm excited to share with you the things that have, to me, become very important in our understanding of how herbs work, why they do the things that they do, and how to understand them in a way that's simple enough that you don't have to spend 25 years of time learning how to use these herbs. It's time for herbology and the use of herbs to come home, to be a part of Dr. Mom's arsenal when it comes to the issues and challenges that happen on a day-to-day basis. We're not trying to replace doctors, but what we are trying to do is equip you more effectively to deal with the kinds of things that are going to happen on a day-to-day basis with our families and with our own personal health. So what I have intended to go over for this overview video is to talk about why herbs work. And we're going to do that in two different ways. Number one, we're going to talk about three levels of involvement, or three levels of benefits that herbs provide. And then after that, we're going to talk about the four categories of herbs and what these individual categories do. So let's begin with the three levels of why herbs work. And basically what this is what do they contain that's beneficial or efficacious for our bodies. The first thing is going to be very common. It would be the proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and fiber that we refer to as macronutrients. Those are a part of every food that we consume, and herbs are simply concentrated foods, so they're going to include those macronutrients as well. Since we're already familiar with those, I don't need to spend a lot of time on that. Let's move to the next category. And this is also very familiar because these are micronutrients, and the micronutrients are vitamins and minerals. I do want to make sure that you're aware that when it comes to minerals, that there are two levels of minerals. There are actually macro minerals and micro minerals. The macro minerals would be iron and calcium, things that we're very familiar with, and where we have to be very conscious of consuming those as a part of our diet. The micronutrients are the ones with all the kind of unusual names that we're not really that familiar with. I mean, who knows what the heck molybdenum is, or selenium, or cadmium, or some of these different micronutrients. Well, even the ones that we would classify as being toxic in any kind of a concentrated level still fit into the category that we call micronutrients and have some kind of a benefit at those very low concentrations. Now, what I'm talking about when I say low concentrations is that the amount that we would need to consume on a daily basis is smaller than what would fit on the point of a pin. Not the head of a pin, but the point of a pin. And that would constitute all of the micronutrients that we need to consume in a day's time. So these are very, very small amounts, but very necessary amounts for the things that our body uses them for. Now, the part that we do need to spend some time on it would be this third category, and that's what we would call active constituents. Active constituents are chemical components of herbs that also come in very small amounts, but they have very important consequences when we consume them. There are four different categories of herbs, and they're based on these active constituents. I'm going to briefly identify those here, and then we'll go into detail in subsequent videos to explain them in greater detail. The first category would be the fire herbs, and I choose that because these are what we call aromatic herbs, and they're the common herbs that we use for cooking. cayenne pepper, ginger, cumin, coriander, oregano, rosemary, all kinds of different spices that we use to make our foods taste better. They also create wonderful aromas when those foods are cooking that make us excited and anxious to consume those foods. Well, the fire herbs are the ones that contain these aromatic principles that add the flavor and the aroma to our food. They also have therapeutic benefits inside of our body, and we'll be talking about those later on. Now, I'm going to go next to the water herbs, which are the mucilin herbs. We ordinarily are familiar with these in a way because of the kind of slippery, slimy texture that they create in certain types of foods. If you've ever eaten okra, you know what I mean. Most of you have eaten oatmeal and know that that has kind of that slippery, slidey kind of effect on your tongue that makes it slide down your throat easily, or at least it's supposed to. Well, what that comes from are the mucilins, or polysaccharides, that those particular types of herbs contain. Now, moving on, let's go to the air herbs, or bitter herbs. These are herbs that have a bitter flavor to them. These are herbs that are cleansing to our body. Maybe I ought to identify quickly here, the fire herbs tend to stimulate, whether that's circulation or digestion. They make things happen inside of our body. They heat things up. The water herbs tend to cool things down, slow things down, relax things, absorb toxins that are in our system. The air herbs are what we would call cleansing herbs. They're also very active, but their tendency is to move things through our system, and that makes them cleansing herbs. Finally, we have the earth herbs, which would be the astringent herbs. Astringent herbs work in almost an opposite way to the air herbs. They contain acids, whereas these contain alkaloids. Acids and alkaloids are opposites from a pH type of a standpoint. And so basically, those two types of herbs have kind of opposing effects. These herbs are good for toning tissues in our body, for tightening things up when there's a body system that's not toned or functional. You'll notice that the kinds of things that I'm referring to here also relate to the two axes on the chart. We have here the one that relates to function, which is the vertical axis, and one that relates to structure, which is the horizontal axis. Those herbs that are on this side tend to loosen structure. These on this side tend to tighten structure. The herbs on this part of the function axis tend to work with weakened conditions, whereas these tend to work with stressed conditions. So in other words, it moves things in a direction as you consume these herbs, and that produces the kinds of results that we look for when we take a particular herb for a particular purpose. There's one final point that I want to make in regard to these. Every herb is going to have characteristics that fall into multiple categories. They just are. They're foods, and so like all foods, not any food is exclusively bitter in taste or spicy in taste. They have different characteristics to the flavor. As is the case with other foods, the herbs have those multiple characteristics. However, almost any herb has a primary characteristic that categorizes it into one of these four categories. The whole premise of the Herb Master's Guidebook is to help you to understand how knowing those four categories and having knowledge about a few specific herbs, just a few, 12 separate herbs in the Herb Master's Guidebook, is going to help you to be an herb master yourself. And that's our purpose. We want to make things simple, we want to make things understandable, and help you to become an herb master for yourself and your family. Thank you for listening.